Hey there, this is Stephanie. Let me tell you a story. This is the first part of a longer series, which is my novel in progress called The Infinite Library. Chapters are published on the site Royal Road, which you can get to from my blog. This is the first part of Chapter 1, titled Meet the Crew. The lobby of the bookstore was silent, but for one noise. A whine Sophia knew could blow the entire operation, and dreaded every time she heard it. She took a deep, cleansing breath, letting it out slowly as she fought to maintain calm in the presence of this danger to the mission. It was up to her to stop the noise from happening, and if she didn't, the consequences would be unthinkable. But why do we have to go to another chain bookstore? The young man next to her had the kind of voice that would pierce through walls at the best of times. When he was being a big whiny baby, it pierced eardrums. I'm just saying that once, just once. I want to go to a nice independent bookshop with an eclectic mix of decor and maybe a specialized collection of books for sale and staffed by a raven-haired, kind, gentle-eyed soul who would meet your gaze with a look that conveyed both hope and recognition. Sophia kept her voice low, which helped keep her sarcasm toned down as well. Beale, I've read your book. I know what you want. You know why we have to go to the big bookstore sometimes. Now shut it and put your mask on. We have to blend in. With the huff only the young and privileged can pull off with such aplomb, Beale took his hands out of his pockets and pulled out the face mask he'd chosen for this particular escapade. Fortunately, face masks had become enough of a fashion statement that the bright geometric pattern with artistic paint splotches didn't mark him as particularly unique. Sophia secured her own, more muted face mask, adjusting the top edge so she wouldn't fog up her glasses and letting her fingers drift over the embroidery of the fabric. The masks were a new wrinkle in the missions that took her team into Prime, but she had to admit that the people had done a marvelous job of creating art out of necessity. With a final glance at Beale that held both confirmation of readiness and warning, she opened the door into the main bookstore. Beale and Sophia were generally the members of their team sent for the Prime side portion of the missions, because their universes were the closest to the current state of Prime. However, nothing ever truly prepared them for the overwhelming power of Prime, particularly when it had been a while. The smells were the thing that always hit Sophia first, because they were the thing that so rarely came up in her universe. It was disorienting to be in a place that was suffused with something that impacted a sense she so rarely used at home that she almost forgot she had it. She saw Beale take a deep, appreciative breath and start drifting toward the cafe, and she snagged his sleeve before he let himself be taken by the coffee and pastries. Job first, then cookies. Beale shook himself as if from a daze and made eye contact with Sophia. I smelled oatmeal raisin. I will be holding you to that promise. The corners of his eyes crinkled with the unseen smile, and Sophia felt herself relax into a responding smile. Regardless of how irritating he was, the man could be charming when he wanted to be. One would hope, as it was his entire point of being, but he was one of the better written Roms she'd met. She pulled out the list from the pocket of her long broomstick-style skirt and consulted the information scrawled upon it. Okay, we have two we need to pick up. One in YA herb fan, and one in fiction. She rolled her eyes as she handed over the list. Fiction is such a useful genre here, isn't it? Like it's all one universe. Well, as far as some of these people are concerned, everything's all one universe, Beale remarked matter-of-factly. They don't know any better, poor things. I recognize the fiction. It's a thinly veiled revenge memoir. I'll grab that one, so you can go amongst your people. He handed her the paper again and, with a wink, strode off in the direction of the largest section of the bookstore. Sophia double-checked the title, then made her way to the second largest section, young adult. Sophia didn't come from a YA universe herself, but Herbfan was her home, so she knew her way around the younger stuff. She followed the telltale signs of disturbance in the universe, books shelved in the wrong section, series out of order, to the center of the problem. Unfortunately, that proved to be a bigger issue than she anticipated. She checked the title on the list once again, though she was certain she had the right book, and her heart sank. The book she was assigned to pick up and bring back to the library for observation, The one that was no longer stable in the universe due to some kind of internal problem happened to be one of the more popular YA publications of the last few months. As such, she was looking at a display of at least 10 copies of the same book. Somehow, she was going to have to find the one copy that contained the other half of her team among all these bestsellers. With a sigh, she picked up the nearest copy and started flipping through the first few pages. With luck, Niles, Neredan, and Veronica would remember the best ways to keep everyone together and let the Prime Side team know where they were. The first few chapters of the book showed nothing more than a standard YA herb fan, apparently a later book in the series that had already established the existence of werewolf baristas in a small town in the northeast United States. One of the werewolves was running for mayor at the beginning of this book. Sophia started to read more intently before remembering why she was there. She set the first copy down and looked at the rest of the display, trying to suss out some kind of sign that would point her to the right book. Fortunately, the bookstore was fairly empty, and there was no one around this aisle of YA. Sophia would never have tried this if there had been people around, but she was worried. The fact that signs of distress had been visible all the way down the shelf meant that whatever incongruity was happening had been there for long enough to cause damage that might take ages to repair, if ever. She needed to find the right book, and fast. Just as she pulled her implements out of her pocket, she heard footsteps behind her. Trying not to look too suspicious, Sophia turned and saw Beale sauntering over to her, the revenge memoir under his arm. "I took care of mine. What's taking you so long?" he remarked, before seeing the display. His face sobered. "Oh, I see. What do you need?" "A little space and privacy," Sophia responded as she set her supplies out on the shelf in front of the book in question. She didn't even look up when she heard Beale walking toward the end of the aisle, but she could see him at the books at the end of the aisle, putting him in a good location to stop people from coming much further and getting closer to her. As much of a pretty boy Rom as he had potential to be useful when the chips were down, Sophia thought to herself. Quickly, she took the string and 2 small quartz crystals from the pile on the shelf and looped them together to make a very loose web. Delicately placing the web on the shelf directly in front of the book copies, she held a button made of amethyst over the web and moved it over the string, following the loops and whirls it made around the crystals. As she did so, she muttered under her breath, letting the language flow through her and use her lips, tongue, and breath to come to life. Sophia always felt a bit drained after channeling magic in this way, but it was the most precise way of getting the information she needed quickly. Once she had completed the circuit with the button, she let go of it, still muttering. The button hovered in the air, spinning slowly, until it moved to the right and landed on top of the copy at the far end of the group. Sophia used a small pencil from her pocket to push the button onto a different copy, and watched it move back to the same one again. Satisfied, Sophia swept all of her things back into her pocket, leaving just the button. Once she'd put away everything, she gently slid the book out of the shelf, and she caught the button as it fell from the top of the book. Once she touched the button again, it fell inert, and the magic that had powdered it spent. Sophia tugged the button back into the same pocket as the rest of her implements and walked over to Beale, holding the book in question. "Shall we?" she said, nodding to the cash register. Whenever possible, the teams would purchase the books they needed rather than stealing them. Prime bookstores were in enough danger of becoming obsolete as it was. The library didn't want to speed that obsolescence along any further than was absolutely necessary. Beale's eyes crinkled again as he followed her line of sight, and he grandly took the book from her and added it to both the revenge memoir and another book Sophia didn't recognize. When she gave him a questioning look, he shrugged, nonchalant. "You left me alone in a bookstore for a minute. Be happy I'm only walking out with 1 extra book. Now, books, then cookies, then library?" "Sounds like a plan," Sophia agreed, and together they made their way to the front of the store, allowing the smells of hot coffee and fresh baked goods to wash over them all over again. So, to see more, I will be posting more of these hopefully about once a week, and you can read the chapters on Royal Road, which is linked to from my blog, insertscenehere.blogspot.com. Thanks much y hasta pronto.